Welcome to Psych for Psychology, a Nystrom & Associates podcast. Our host, Brett Cushing, is a licensed marriage and family therapist at Nystrom. Each week, he talks about all things mental health and therapy with guests, and you get a chance to dive into specific psychology topics that help promote personal development and wellness. And now, your host, Brett.
Hello and welcome to another podcast edition here of Psych for Psychology. Today we're going to be talking about a very universal topic.
Yes.
And Krista, this is a hard one actually, and yet it's so beneficial. We're talking about forgiveness.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, this can be an emotionally charged one, and yet it's incredibly practical when we think about forgiveness.
Yes.
We are getting hurt in life. You're going to get hurt in life. And I'm not even going to ask if you've been hurt. I mean, of course.
Me, not, no.
No, you've lived
have.
a charmed, perfect life. Yeah.
And this might shock you, but I've also hurt others before.
No, that is hard to believe.
I know.
Sweet Krista.
Yeah. I've hurt some people like we all do.
We do. And hurt people. And so it's a universal phenomenon amongst people. So if you're a person, this applies to you. This is highly relevant. In fact, I just thought of this. We were talking about how your car was stolen almost a year ago.
Yes.
And I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I love that. I didn't even think of it.
I didn't either, but it just popped in my mind.
Good.
You had your car stolen.
I did.
Honestly, have you forgiven those people who stole your car?
You know what? I'm really glad you asked me that, because I think what I might do, not because I'm trying to get out of it, but at the end of the podcast, after we've kind of talked through everything,
right.
I do want to answer that question, because once we delve into kind of what forgiveness is and what it looks like and all of that, I think I'll have an answer for you. I really do.
I love that idea. Let's do that. And notice how hesitant I was, because when we ask and inquire about that, there can be, for many of us, this sense of defensiveness. We kind of want to protect ourselves, but just notice and not that you had it, but I think for those of us that are listening, and I've seen it myself, when people ask me, well, have you forgiven this person? I can get defensive, or I can feel like somebody's sort of spiritualizing this. And I might add on the end kind of a spiritual dimension from this. But in general, we're going to be talking about this from a psychological perspective.
Yes.
And we want to notice that, this is something that our emotions can get very high. And maybe just as we talk about this in the outset, let's realize that that's normal, and let's not be judgmental towards ourselves for having those negative emotions that come up when even just it's suggested or inquired if you're forgiving somebody. And let's not judge if we have negative emotions towards other people, because some of us have been hurt in profound ways. And I know I have, and you likely have too. And so this is highly relevant, and we'll dive right in about what forgiveness is. What in the world is it?
What is it?
Well, one thing it's not necessarily a warm fuzzy. Okay. It's not that we're suggesting life, you need to forgive so that you have rainbows and unicorns in your life and you're feeling warm fuzzies. That's not it. In fact, forgiveness, I talk a lot about this with couples. In our next podcast, we're going to be talking a little bit.
Yeah, good call. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it happens not just with couples. It happens everywhere. Virtually every setting. School settings, with parents, with neighbors, with colleagues, with supervisors, with staff.
With roommates.
Yes.
I don't have any, but I hear a lot about other people's roommates,
Yeah, right. And this has never happened to me, but some people get the one finger salute when they're driving. So maybe we have to forgive other anonymous people that are driving. So this is really for everybody. And what are we talking about, though, when we're talking about forgiveness? What in the world is forgiveness? Well, in the most simplistic way, I would say forgiveness is to release. It's as though I'm holding on tightly to something, and I'm holding my fist right now, and I just noticed if I hold and I clench this fist really hard,
right,
it actually feels kind of good. I'm kind of getting rid of a little bit of energy with this. But if I did this for the entire podcast, I would have nail marks all through my hand. I'd be exhausted.
You'd be exhausted. Exactly. Yeah. No, I really like that image. Another image that comes to mind is canceling a debt. So like, you had kind of the physical gripping aspect. And I think another way to look at forgiveness is like if you're keeping a ledger of all the things that someone's done wrong.
Right.
And it's kind of like clearing the ledger.
Yes.
Like it's like you're completely, that is all taken away.
It's all gone. Right.
Yep.
Well, I think of an analogy I'd heard about this, the way they used to catch monkeys in the jungle. And so what they would do is, nobody could catch a monkey. And so they would have these boxes, and in the top of the box, there'd be a little hole. And they would kind of hold up a banana for all the monkeys in the trees to see, and they would drop the banana in there.
Okay.
So then they would leave, and then the monkeys would inevitably come, scampering down over to the box, put their hand in the box, grab onto the banana, and try to pull their hand out.
Oh.
And if they let go of the banana, they could get their hand out. But if they held onto that banana, they couldn't get their hand out. They weren't free.
Correct.
They were stuck.
Oh, man.
So that's how they would just come, and they would very easily take them captive.
Sure.
Because the monkey simply would not release what it was holding on to.
Wow.
And it is kind of a powerful image, I think, for us, because many of us, we can identify with that. There is some pain in our lives that we just simply won't release. And there's good reasons why we won't release it. In other words, it's very understandable. However, we can be taken captive, and we hurt ourselves because we just don't release it.
Yes, that is such a great image. Actually, I hadn't thought of it that way, but it makes sense. And I think maybe one of the things we'll get into is sometimes people don't even realize it's an option to let go, right?
I never thought of that.
Because the monkey's got the banana, and if the monkey just knew, like, if I just release this banana, I'll probably go and find something else. Like, but they're so stuck on what they want or what they think they have to have. So I think with forgiveness, maybe there's something with that too.
Yeah, right? That's a really good idea as we get into the mind of the monkeys, with that banana.
We're into monkey psychology.
Yes. I think maybe they, like to your point, they don't realize it's an option. That's powerful.
Yeah.
And it's as though, like, I need this. I can't live without this. In fact, if I get rid of it, that's when I'm vulnerable.
Right. What if I don't find anything else? What if this is all there is?
Yeah. Yep. And I think that really speaks to why we struggle with forgiveness is because there's this sense that I have to have this.
I have to hang on to this. Yep.
Yeah. There's utility in holding on to it, and there's real vulnerability if I let go of it.
Correct.
And so it's really just the other way around, isn't it?
It's got to be.
Yeah.
I would think. Yeah.
The utility is when I release it. And the vulnerability is when I hold on to it.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm saying this right, but there's kind of an old saying that holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting your offender to die.
Yes, I have heard that. I think that is the saying.
Accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I really like that. It's so true.
It is so true. Gosh, I'm excited to report back about my stolen car at the end. I'm thinking about, what happened. So,
well, and it is good. I try to think about this in my own life because of this reality that I'm actually vulnerable when I hold on to those negative feelings of bitterness, resentment, malice. When I'm gossiping about something or somebody who's hurt me, I'm tearing them down, or I have this seething anger towards somebody. And so we need to probably, stop, pause, just ask ourselves, am I having that? Am I experiencing that? Because we really, when we talk about forgiveness, we start with those feelings of unforgiveness. Mm-hmm. And to your point earlier about with the ledger and canceling a debt, we know when we have forgiveness because we don't have those negative feelings anymore.
Right.
So I know we're going to talk about couples next time, but I can't help but notice when couples come in to see me, they'll maybe say, yeah, well, we had a big fight last week. And inside, all right, sounds terrible as a therapist. I'm like, great.
Yes. No, I have the same reaction.
Really?
Yes.
Why? All right. Yeah. Why do you have that?
Well, so because I want to hear about kind of what happened, but also if they're arguing, it means they haven't completely shut down yet.
Right.
So that's one aspect of it for me, is if there was a fight or a conflict, first of all, there's going to be so much information to gather from the conflict and how they argue, etc.
Absolutely.
But if you're so shut down that you're not arguing anymore, then I'm like, ooh, there's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of unforgiveness going on.
A lot of unforgiveness.
What about you?
Well, I like it for very much the same reason. Yeah. And I noticed that when I talk to them, I said, well, where are you guys now? And they'll say, well, we're over it.
Yes.
And I love that. Like, you're over it. Well, cool. So what does that mean, you're over it? And then they kind of look at me with a deer in the headlights.
Yeah,
what kind of question is that?
We're just over it.
We
moved on.
We moved on. And so then I push back, so all right, cool. So you're over it. Mm-hmm. And how does that happen? Mm-hmm. How do you move from being really ticked off and now you're over it? Is that do you just travel around the sun on this planet and then suddenly, bang, you're over it? Or what happens? Right. And then they still look kind of confused. And I'll say, well, all right, so you had this disconnect.
Yeah.
How did you reconnect? Mm-hmm. And it really kind of exposes for the couple, we have not dealt with this.
Okay. Have you ever had this one where the couple comes in and they're working through some major betrayal? Mm-hmm. And one of the partner who, let's say, didn't do the betraying, says, oh, I've forgiven so-and-so. But it's kind of clear as you start to work on it that is maybe not the case, because that's why they're here, is right. So they maybe don't know what they mean when they say, I've forgiven so-and-so.
Why do you think somebody does that? When they'll sort of make it almost like this trivialization of forgiveness, or this just, it's, I'm already there. I've forgiven them. Why do you think people do that?
Totally. I think that sometimes people mistake forgiveness with staying with their partner. So I've worked with couples where there was an infidelity or some major thing and they stayed together. And so the partner saying, I've forgiven so-and-so, they're by the fact that we're still together.
Yes.
But that's only one part of it. And so what you end up finding, I think, what I've ended up finding with the couple, that type of situation, is that yes, you're still together, but there's still a lot of resentment and unforgiveness that's just lurking under the surface, right?
Right, and it doesn't take much to have it come above the surface.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, maybe I think that speaks to the barriers and the resistance
to forgiveness.
And it comes in a lot of these mischaracterizations. And so maybe specifically, let's talk about what forgiveness is not. So, I've heard, one of them is, you forgive and you forget. And so forgiveness means I forget what happened to me.
Yeah, right.
And so that's very understandable. I don't want to forget.
Right.
I think people want to forget because it almost feels like it cheapens and it invalidates the hurt. And like you said, the betrayal sometimes that's happened.
Yep.
And that's real.
That is real. Yeah.
So I often say, to say forgiveness, to forgive is to forget. That's not forgetting. That's called denial.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is. It's denial of what actually happened.
Yep. Correct.
And so that's one of the big myths, I think, about forgiveness, is that it means I have to forget.
Yes. Without exploring, how did we get here?
Right? Yeah. And without any validation for the pain that you've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and sometimes it's not going to be by the person that's offended us, but we do need some validation. And whether it's from somebody else, maybe it's a therapist, but even more importantly, for us to validate it ourselves. Like, yes, this really hurt. Yes, I'm really angry. Yes, this is how this is affecting me. We don't want to cheapen the offense. So a lot of times, we want to go quickly, like, oh, I'm just forgiven and we're moving on because it's too hard to go there and to validate this.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's not forgetting. It's also not approval.
Ah, this is a good one. Yeah. Like basically, if someone wrongs me and I forgive them, there's a misunderstanding sometimes like, well, I'm condoning what they did. Right?
Right.
Because there's certain things you've I'm sure heard people say like what so-and-so did is unforgivable.
Oh, yes.
So, but that shows they're trying to take a stance of this is just, I just can't reconcile this within myself. Like I can't,
right.
I can't, if I forgive this, I'm committing some sort of thing against my own values. Right? Like,
right.
So.
Yeah, it would be like you with your car, right? Your car was stolen. You had people trying to use credit cards and things like that. And so you don't condone that and say, hey,
you know what? That's fine.
Everybody should go through this. It was such a growth experience.
5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah.
Recommend.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
No, good call. Yeah. I'm not condoning that behavior. Absolutely not.
Right. But notice it feels like that too.
Sure. I think that's a common misconception about forgiveness.
Yeah, and I think like that's where we go, and that's where that resistance comes from. Sometimes somebody says, well, have you forgiven this person? It's like, because it feels like inherent within that question, have you forgiven this person?
Sure.
What are you saying? I'm supposed to approve of what happened to me?
Exactly.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. Yep.
So, and I think also inherent within that, we've talked in recent podcasts about validation and invalidation. And one of the invalidating words that people use against and weaponize with other people is the word should. And I think we all know sort of intuitively, like, yeah, morally, it's probably the right thing to forgive somebody. So if somebody asks you, well, have you forgiven this person?
Right.
It's sort of inferred that you're shoulding on me.
Right,
here.
like, have you done the right thing?
Yeah. Have you,
have you conducted yourself properly?
Right. Yeah, and so maybe that's why we have this resistance. And that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to understand that nobody is shoulding on anybody on the podcast here. We want to validate the pain.
Yep.
And we're not at all suggesting that we approve of the offense that's happened to us.
Exactly.
That just cheapens it, that we further live in that sense of denial about what happened. And then when we do forgive, what are we actually forgiving if I've forgotten? I'm not forgiving anything. It's There's nothing to forgive if I've forgotten. And it really cheapens the idea of what forgiveness actually is.
Sure. Yep.
So here's the big one that I find.
All right.
That people get confused. And that is, they understand forgiveness means reconciliation.
Okay.
So what's the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation? Okay, so let's say I'm the one who stole your car.
Okay,
I'm
how
the
dare you?
offender. Yeah, I know. Well, I like Subarus. They're good cars. They're safe and so I stole this. I'm the offender.
Yes.
You're the offended.
Okay,
forgiveness is different from reconciliation because you as the offended who had the offense done to you.
Yes.
Forgiveness is when you change. All those negative feelings go away. You're releasing the banana, so to speak, right? You're stopping drinking that poison for yourself of all those negative feelings. So, but that doesn't mean you have to be reconciled.
Okay.
To forgive only means that the offended changes. It doesn't mean you have a relationship with whoever it is.
Okay, great. Yeah, I get it.
So that's different from reconciliation. And for people, maybe they've experienced abuse, and this offender is very unsafe.
Yes.
And I know in some like Christian communities, you have, and I'm not being critical. I'm a Christian myself.
Right.
Better be. I was a pastor for many years. So I'm not trying to be critical of Christians. I just know that I hear that and have heard that all too often, that you have to be reconciled. I don't think that's consistent. I think it's totally incongruent with the Christian faith, and it's not helpful, and it's dangerous to be reconciled with someone who is an offender, someone who might be an abuser.
Right.
That person has not changed. Now,
sure.
Of course, reconciliation would be a wonderful goal. It's just impossible.
Yes, right.
Sometimes
it is.
Right. So, reconciliation is when the offender changes. Then you can be reconciled.
Okay. So in order to do that, so if you were the offender and stole my car,
yes,
in order to be reconciled, would you have to apologize to me? Or just like in your own way work through what you did?
That's such a great question.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, so I led with validation.
Yes,
there. It really is a great question, because I think that's where people are. Like, okay, fine, the person's changed.
How?
Yeah. Like, so they apologized. Like, it's like you got a sibling growing up and your parents say, tell them you're sorry, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah, say sorry and forgive them.
Yeah, right. Forgive
like just that simple.
And now hug and whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that can cheapen the pain, obviously, too. It cheapens the sense of vulnerability. If we feel we have to forgive and then reconcile immediately with somebody.
Right.
So this is what I do, and we'll talk about this next time with couples. Yep. When there's been infidelity, for instance, let's just say it's the man who has had an affair and the wife is struggling to forgive him and maybe says, all right, I think I've forgiven it, but whoa, now like she's really worried. Like, do I have to be reconciled with him? And how do I know? And meanwhile, he's changed dramatically, and he's working, and he's like, oh, I was insensitive, etc. And so, but he's wondering, when will she ever forgive me? And she's wondering, like, do I have to be reconciled? And so I'll say this. I'll say this to him. I'll say, when she knows you for your change as much as your offense, then she'll trust you. That's when reconciliation can happen. So in other words, again, you as the offender, when you change and she knows you for the change that you've gone through as much as for the offense, that's likely when reconciliation will happen. And then I'll say, notice, I didn't put a timeline on that. You do have some control over this by working on change as the offender.
Right.
And as she sees that, then reconciliation can happen. Now, what's interesting, this kind of gets into more of the barriers we have towards forgiveness. What comes up is, I'll see in a situation like that where she will begin to move toward him again because she sees change. And then as she moves towards him and has like, oh, this could be great. Oh my God, he could hurt me again. And there's all this sense of vulnerability that comes up, and it's visceral and it's strong. And then she would pull back very quickly and is angry again. And he's thinking, what happened?
Right.
Well, he's not yet known for his change as much as for his offense.
Right.
And it's very understandable. It's very normal. But I think that's an important distinction between forgiveness and reconciliation. So if you're listening on the podcast today, we're not saying you have to be reconciled with whoever has offended you. In fact, notice, you don't have any control over that.
Absolutely.
The control is over the other offender. So I think these are some important distinctions, and it shows like those barriers that we have.
Well, this is making me think of the 12-step program too, because there's a step about you make a list of all your wrongdoings, and then you approach, if you choose to, you can approach people and make an amends to them. And so that would be kind of that reconciliation, I think, where you're basically saying, I have done these things and I'm changing, I'm working this program, and now this is my attempt to kind of make it right with you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I love the 12-step program. And that's one of the reasons. There is this sense of owning your own offense towards people and actively making amends as a lifestyle. Wow, where would our culture be?
Seriously.
Where would our families, where would our companies be if people did that on a regular basis? Taking an inventory.
Yep.
Where have I hurt people?
Where have I hurt people?
And then going to make amends.
Yep. And that's one other kind of thing I love about the 12-step recovery programs too, is there's this thing about resentments. So if you're holding resentments yourself, that is a danger. You're kind of at danger of relapsing and going back to old behaviors because again, that's I'm drinking the poison and expecting someone else to suffer. So I'm holding these resentments for what? Right.
And we can relapse towards using.
Yes.
We can relapse towards not forgiving.
Yep. Oh, good call. And they do talk about that too. Like you could be sober for years and years, and then it's like, but I'm so resentful, right? So it's like, yeah, you're sober from your drug or alcohol of choice, but you're still holding all these resentments, which is a different type of
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that's highly relevant to where people are. Let's try to become a little more relevant even still. How do we do this? How
good one.
Do we forgive? How? So I've used this. This is actually from a Christian therapist. I think he's a psychologist, Everett Worthington. I found it really helpful.
Nice.
And it's not like super spiritual, like, it's not heavy into Bible talk and things. It's real practical stuff. Nice. Not that the Bible isn't.
No, but it sounds like a universal application versus you have to be Christian.
Yes, thank you.
You don't have to be practicing Christian.
So he really talks about reaching for forgiveness. REACH. It's just an
I love
acronym.
Me a good acronym.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's got to be good. So the R in reach stands for recall. Recall the hurt. And we kind of touched on that. We don't want to just deny it, that it happened. It's not forgetting. It's important to recall it.
Yep.
Why might that be important for us?
Yeah, like this really happened, and there's going to be a lot of feelings in there, so we have to kind of process that, right? And here's the different ways it affected me. So when I recall it, I can look at kind of the different dimensions. Yeah.
Right. So it's really important that we recall it. A lot of times we recoil from the hurt, but we need to recall the hurt. Yep. And in that as we recall it, it's in the midst of recalling it that we make a decision to forgive.
Ooh, I like that.
So a lot of times, again, we started off at the beginning, forgiveness is a warm fuzzy, and maybe that's the byproduct of it.
Sure.
It can be that, possibly. Yep. It really starts with not a feeling at all that's positive. It starts with those feelings of unforgiveness and a decision, a clear decision. I am going to forgive this person.
Yep.
It doesn't mean you're there.
Yep.
It just means, okay, I'm recalling my hurt. I'm validating. This is credible. This is real.
Yeah.
I need to, and I am making a decision. I need to release this banana because I'm being held captive here.
Nice. Nice.
So that's the R, is recall the hurt.
Okay.
Now the E is empathize with your partner.
Ooh.
Okay. Now I would say, take it beyond partner and empathize with
the
your
other person or the offender,
or if you will, the person or persons who stole your car.
I'm like, okay, I got it in my mind now.
Yeah.
I'm going to do REACH as we go.
All right, cool.
Yep.
I love it. So
empathize with the thief.
Yeah. So what are we talking about when we talk about empathizing? It's really putting ourselves in the position of that person.
Yeah.
And that can be hard. Mm-hmm. We don't want to think about that person in anything other than a negative way.
Right. Well, this is really important because, even just now going through this, I'm thinking about the person. It was a woman who stole my car. It was caught on camera. And clearly this, I'm kind of thinking, well, how can I empathize with this person? I don't want to pity this person, right?
Right.
I also don't want it to be like, oh, this is why, and make excuses for this person. But think about, it makes me think, like, how lost do you have to be if you're stealing a vehicle? Like, again, whatever the story is there, I don't know what her story is.
Yeah.
But again, like, what's going on and what's happened in your life that this is, like, the path that you're choosing? Again, I'm not trying to be judgmental, but, like, that's a pretty big deal. And you have to have a pretty big, like, case of, screw this, life's not important. I'm just going to do this because I'm desperate or whatever.
I love that question. How desperate does someone's life have to be to do that kind of behavior?
Right. And it was planned. I mean, it was orchestrated. Like, she had followed me. And so it was this whole thing. So it was like, wow. Like, so anyway, that's what's on my mind with empathize.
Yeah. And notice that can be hard because, like, now there's some time that's gone by. And so the intensity of your emotion initially is probably dwindled a bit.
Right.
And yet, it's hard to do this. And I think of, I'm really fortunate. Growing up, my dad was a cop. My mom was a nurse, both, in the helping professions.
Wow.
And as a cop, my dad would see, humanity's inhumanity to each other on a daily basis.
All day, every day.
Such a heart for cops. We got to do something about first responders.
That is such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I really respect that this came from him, but he would stress growing up all the time. And I'd talk about my day or somebody I'm frustrated with, and he would listen and he would say, Brett, remember, there's always a reason why people do what they do. And he said, your job is to try to understand that. Wow. And it was just really drilled into me to look beyond the surface, to look beyond the offense and why I'm offended, and understand there's reasons why. And that's what we're talking about is empathize. And there's a phrase that I've always liked. It doesn't mean I'm condoning it.
Exactly.
It means like it's understandable. And it's not acceptable. And the two can coexist at the same time.
That.
And I can hold on to that to say, yeah, this is unacceptable. And I can hold on to the reality that, and it's understandable.
Right, exactly.
There's always a reason.
Yep. No, that's great.
All right, so the A is an altruistic gift.
Ooh, fancy.
I think he's reaching a little bit, trying to find the A, altruistic. I mean, when was the last time you used the word altruistic?
I was going to say probably it's been a minute.
It's been a minute or two.
Or 2 or 3,
So an altruistic gift is really, you're giving something. If it's altruistic, you're giving something and not expecting anything in return.
Okay, so like unselfishly.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. No strings attached. You give an altruistic gift.
Nice.
And so as we kind of make that decision, when we recall the hurt, we empathize with our offender. And then as we do that, those negative emotions tend to dissipate because we have greater context, greater perspective. And that means greater meaning of what happened. And then when we have a different perspective and a different meaning, like even you, as you talked about this person that stole your car, I love your question. How desperate does someone have to be?
Yes.
You're validating that this person, there was a reason why this person did this, and
it's not acceptable.
Not okay.
Yep.
And so, all right, as you continually work through things like that, as we do, we can get to a point where, you know what, I want to give a gift to this person. Now, the gift, it can be just a handwritten note. It can be, it's not, $100 gift card. It's, you're not giving her your car keys,
right.
But you give something, and it can be a token gift. Now, for some people, the person that hurt us is already dead.
Wow. Yeah.
And we can still give that person a gift. We can go to their gravesite and we can give something, a flower. We can give a note and bury it there. We can do all sorts of things
to symbolize it.
Wow.
This is so interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way.
So, and it's really powerful because it gives closure to you as the offended, and it gives kind of some closure to the other person that, wow, Thank you.
I just thought of, I still have a car key from my car that got stolen.
Ooh.
And what am I going to do with it? So I just
what are you going to do with it?
I just thought of what I'm going to do with it. Some sort of symbolic, like, releasing of it. Maybe throw it away, or I don't know you can't really burn a car key, I guess, but like some sort of release of this.
Really, yeah, you're releasing that, and you're releasing this other person.
Yep.
From that debt.
Yes. Cool.
So that's the altruistic gift. And then the C is commit.
Okay.
So once you've forgiven somebody, maybe you write a note or something, you kind of say, hey, today I forgive you. I forgive you for hurting me. And then this ensures that the forgiving lasts. So it's a real commitment now.
Sure.
Like I made a decision to begin with, and now I've really solidified this. I'm
sticking with it.
I set a date. This is when this happened.
I like that. You can say it out loud to another person even. Like you can say to a friend or partner, like, hey, I forgave so-and-so, right? Or I forgave the person who stole my car.
Right. You can. Now, the H in reach for forgiveness is hold on to forgiveness. Because sometimes those negative feelings come back.
Yes, they do.
You might be having your car parked and you see some woman walking by looking in your car, and
it brings back all those feelings of yeah.
And then what happens is we tend to think, well, I must not have forgiven this person.
Sure. Like I shouldn't feel this way because I thought I forgave.
Right.
Yeah.
Notice the should, right?
Yeah. Good call.
So we tend to be critical of ourselves rather than kind of be curious and say, oh, wow, look at that. Look at those emotions. It doesn't mean I haven't forgiven this person. It does mean that, some of those feelings have come back. So now we hold on to forgiveness. Yep. And now I've forgiven this person. Yep. I've released this person. I'm not going to go and hold on to these negative feelings now. I have actually forgiven this person. Yep. So you pivot away from that. You don't deny those emotions. You can validate them and say, yeah, that was painful, and I've forgiven this person. Yep. So that's what it means to reach for forgiveness and how we can go about doing it. Where are you at?
I feel good. So what's funny? I actually was thinking about, I don't know if this is like bonus points at the end of Reach, but I was actually thinking about some really good things that came out of the experience of having my car stolen. Yeah. So I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm grateful that this woman stole my car, but I also have been able to kind of learn from it and also be like, wow, I handled a really difficult situation. Yes. And I saw myself be able to cope with it and use resources. And so again, even though it was a horrible, stressful thing, I came away from it, and I'm not just trying to paint sunshine and rainbows on it. It was horrible. Yeah. And I also feel like this showed me that I can cope when there's a crisis. So yeah. I feel like I've forgiven.
Well, I'm happy for you, and hopefully all of us can keep working towards this. Totally. I think one thing that I find is because people get should on in some church communities sometimes, in some religious communities, that this is a touchy subject. And so maybe for bonus material.
Yes, bonus material.
I just wanted to differentiate Christian forgiveness and how it's different. We see the value from a psychological perspective. Yes. The importance and value of forgiveness. I would add this, that from a Christian perspective, the motive and the means is radically different. Okay. So the motive from a psychological perspective is for myself. I need to forgive clearly because this is what's healthy for me. Yep. A Christian perspective would totally affirm that is true. Okay. Yep. And so that needs to be our motive. And the motive is I need to forgive for the sake of my offender. So notice how hard that is. I don't know about you. I cannot do that.
That's a whole different take, right?
Right. Yeah. Somebody cuts me off on the highway. I'm sorry. I don't want to forgive this person for their sake.
For their sake, sure.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So I just want to add, like, I think there's a lot of confusion. I've talked a little bit about some of the differences and trying to dispel the myth. So I just want to highlight from a Christian perspective, the motive is not only ourself, it's also I want what's best for the other person. And so when forgiveness happens, I don't just have a dissipation of the negative. I have a replacement with all these positive emotions. I actually have positive regard. I want the absolute best for this person that offended me, even if that person never changes.
Sure.
So that's a pretty high bar. It's so high that it's unattainable, I would say. And so that means the means of forgiving is different. And to go back to the AA 12-step analogy, if I'm powerless to have that motive, I have to have a different means. It can't be myself. I have to be a higher power. And in Christian faith, it would be Jesus Christ is the means by which I do that. So I just wanted to highlight, because I do see people, I hear a lot about this. And hopefully we've dispelled some of the harmful myths about forgiveness and reconciliation. We've given some clear things that we can do and work towards forgiveness, highlight the obstacles, and kind of clarify what Christian forgiveness is about too. And nobody can say, I can't say to you, you really should forgive this person.
Exactly.
That's
it has
your
to be
issue.
A personal. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a personal decision, and like we said in the beginning, talking about the monkey with banana, it is an option.
It is an option.
Forgive.
Right.
It's not a should, but it is an option.
Correct. And it's a powerful option. Well, we hope everybody has been able to take some of these powerful principles with them and apply this in your life. We are certainly not suggesting you should forgive. We just want to present the information to wrestle with it. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great week.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.